The stagecoach lurched to a stop, throwing Mara against the wooden seat hard enough to bruise. Dust billowed through the open window, coating her already filthy dress in another layer of frontier grime. She'd been traveling for 6 days straight, 3 trains, 2 coaches, and 1 humiliating night sleeping in a depot bathroom because the innkeeper had taken one look at her bruised wrists and decided she was trouble. He wasn't wrong. "End of the line, miss." The driver's voice carried the particular blend of pity and suspicion she'd grown accustomed to. "Ashford Ranch. You sure this is where you want to be?" Mara gathered her battered suitcase and the small wooden box she'd kept on her lap the entire journey. Inside the box, wrapped in damp cloth, was her sourdough starter, the only thing she'd managed to steal when she fled. Well, that in her life. "I'm sure," she lied. The ranch sprawled before her like a dare. Weathered buildings clustered around a main house that had clearly seen better decades. Fences sagged, paint peeled. In the distance, cattle-dotted brown hills that stretched toward mountains so sharp they looked like they could cut the sky open. Nothing about this place said safe, but nothing about her situation required safety, just distance. 3,000 miles ought to be enough. The driver dumped her trunk in the dirt without ceremony and was gone before she could thank him, the coach kicking up a dust storm that forced her to shield her eyes. When the air cleared, a man stood 10 feet away, apparently materialized from nowhere. Cole Ashford looked exactly like his telegram had sounded, hard, weathered, and thoroughly uninterested in niceties. Maybe 40, maybe older. The sun had done its work on his face. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hands that showed years of labor. He wore his grief like a coat, visible in the set of his jaw and the flatness of his eyes. "You're the cook." Not a question. "Baker," Mara corrected, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. "Mara Quinn. Don't care what you call yourself. You bake bread, you keep the kitchen clean, you stay out of my way. $50 a month, room and board. Those the only bags you got?" "Yes." He grunted, picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing, and started toward the house. Mara followed, clutching her starter box and trying not to stumble over the uneven ground. Her city boots weren't made for this terrain. Then again, neither was she. The kitchen was worse than she'd imagined. A cast-iron stove dominated one wall, its surface crusted with what might have been food or possibly some form of geological deposit. Dishes were piled in a basin that smelled like death. The floor hadn't been properly swept in months, maybe years. Flour and sugar had been stored in barrels without lids, attracting mice whose droppings decorated the counters like terrible confetti. "Last cook left 3 months ago," Cole said from the doorway. "Couldn't handle the isolation. Before that, we had a woman who lasted 2 weeks before she ran off with a traveling salesman. Before that," he stopped. "Doesn't matter. You'll do your job or you'll leave. I don't tolerate drama." Mara set down her box very carefully. In her old life, the one that ended 4 weeks ago with a fist and a decision, she would have apologized, would have made herself smaller, quieter, more acceptable. "I'll need supplies," she said instead. "Proper flour, fresh yeast, salt, sugar, clean containers for storage, new dish towels. That stove needs to be stripped and reseasoned. And I'll need to know food preferences, dietary restrictions, how many I'm cooking for. 3. Me, my foreman Jack, and my daughter. She doesn't eat much." Something flickered across his face. "No preferences. Just make bread and whatever else keeps us working. I'll have Jack get you a supply list tomorrow." "Your daughter is none of your concern." His voice dropped 20 degrees. "You don't talk to her, you don't bother her, you leave her completely alone. That's not a suggestion." Before Mara could respond, he was gone. She stood in the wreckage of the kitchen, listening to his boots fade down the hallway. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. But it took 6 hours to make the kitchen even remotely functional. She built a fire in the stove. The wood was stored outside, naturally, and she had to make 4 trips to get enough to heat water for cleaning. The dishes were worse up close. Some of them had food welded on so thoroughly she had to soak them in boiling water for an hour before attempting to scrub. Her hands, soft from 3 years of city living, blistered and bled. She didn't stop. The mice had been busy in the flour barrel. She dumped the entire thing outside, watching rats scatter from the pile. The sugar was salvageable if she sifted it. She found dishes, pots, and utensils buried under the chaos. Decent quality, just neglected. Someone had once cared about this kitchen. By the time the sun set, she had a clean workspace, organized supplies, and a pot of beans simmering on the now functional stove. She'd found onions in a root cellar, along with carrots and potatoes that were mostly still good. No meat. She'd have to ask about that tomorrow. Her starter needed feeding. She found a clean jar, mixed flour and water in the careful ratios she'd learned from her grandmother, and added a spoonful of the starter that had traveled 3,000 miles. It bubbled hopefully, alive despite everything. Like her. She was checking the beans when she felt eyes on her. Turning slowly, she saw a girl in the doorway. 7, maybe 8 years old. Dark hair that needed brushing. Wearing a dress that was too small and boots that were too large. But it was her eyes that stopped Mara cold, huge, dark, and absolutely silent. Not shy, not cautious. Silent in a way that spoke of things broken. "Hello," Mara said softly. "I'm Mara. I'm the new cook." The girl stared. "I'm making beans. They'll be ready in about an hour. Are you hungry?" Nothing. Not even a blink. "Leave her alone," Cole's voice came from behind the girl, sharp enough to make Mara flinch. "Emma, go to your room." The girl turned and disappeared like smoke. Cole filled the doorway, his face hard. "I told you to stay away from her." "She came to the kitchen. I don't care. You don't talk to her. You don't look at her. You pretend she doesn't exist." He paused. "She doesn't speak. Hasn't said a word in 2 years. Doctors can't figure out why, so don't bother trying to fix her. Just leave her alone." Mara's throat tightened. She knew that kind of silence. Had lived in it herself once upon a time when speaking only made things worse. "I understand," she said quietly. "Do you?" He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. "Who gave you those bruises?" Her hand went automatically to her wrist, where finger-shaped marks were fading from purple to yellow. She'd thought the long sleeves hid them. "Someone who won't be a problem anymore." "You running from the law?" "No." "From a man?" She met his eyes. "From a monster. There's a difference." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Cole nodded once, sharply. "Dinner's at 6. Breakfast at 5. Lunch gets packed for me and Jack to take out. You burn the bread, you're gone. You cause trouble, you're gone. You go near my daughter. I won't." He left without another word. Mara stood in the clean kitchen, listening to the beans bubble and her starter breathe, and tried not to think about the silent girl with eyes that had seen too much. She woke at 4, unable to sleep past the habits of her old life. The small room off the kitchen was sparse, but clean. A narrow bed, a washstand, a single window that looked out over the eastern hills. Someone had left a quilt on the bed, hand-sewn, the stitching a little uneven. Emma's mother, maybe. The dead wife Cole's telegram hadn't mentioned, but whose absence shouted from every corner of this house. Mara dressed in the dark and went to the kitchen. The starter had done its work overnight, bubbling and fragrant. She fed it again, setting aside enough for the day's baking, then started the stove. Bread required patience. You couldn't rush it, couldn't force it, couldn't make it be something it wasn't. You mixed flour, water, salt, and starter. You kneaded until your shoulders ached. You let it rise in its own time. You shaped it with respect. You baked it with attention. And if you did it right, if you brought the right kind of care to every step, you got something honest, something that fed more than just hunger. By 5:30, she had 4 loaves in the oven and bacon frying. She'd found eggs in a coop behind the house. The chickens had not been pleased to see her at dawn, but they'd surrendered their production anyway. Coffee was brewing, strong and dark. When Cole walked in at 5:45, she had his plate ready. Eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, and a thick slice of bread, still warm with butter. He stared at it. "Something wrong?" she asked. "No." He sat down slowly. "It's just, nobody's made me breakfast in a long time." He ate in silence, methodically, not looking at her. When he finished, he stood and carried his plate to the basin. "Bread's good," he said. "Jack takes his lunch at noon. He'll come to the kitchen." "Emma?" He stopped. "Leave a plate for her. She'll eat when she's ready." Then he was gone, and Mara was alone with the smell of fresh bread and the weight of all the things he hadn't said. Jack turned out to be everything Cole wasn't. Talkative, friendly, fascinated by the fact that the kitchen no longer smelled like a mass grave. "You're a miracle worker," he announced, helping himself to a second piece of bread. "I've been eating hardtack and beans for 3 months. This is—" He kissed his fingers dramatically. "This is civilization." He was younger than Cole, maybe 30, with sun-bleached hair and an easy smile. "Mexican mother," he told her cheerfully. "Irish father, born right here in this valley. Cole's my cousin. Well, second cousin. Well, third cousin once removed? Hell, I don't know. Our families go back. When his wife Sarah died, he kind of—" Jack made a gesture that encompassed the ranch, the house, the general state of everything. Folded in on himself, stopped talking, stopped caring, just worked until he couldn't stand up. Emma stopped talking right around the same time. "What happened to Sarah?" Mara asked, packing cold chicken and bread into a tin pail for his afternoon. "Fever, 2 winters ago. Hit her fast, took her faster. Doc couldn't do anything. Cole—" He shook his head. "He hasn't been right since. And Emma, she just went quiet. Pediatrician in town says it's selective mutism, says she'll talk when she's ready, but it's been 2 years. Cole's given up hoping. He told me not to talk to her. Yeah, he tells everyone that. Doesn't want her getting attached to people who'll leave. Last cook tried to be friendly. Emma started warming up to her, then the woman ran off. Emma didn't eat for 3 days." Jack's expression turned serious. "So maybe Cole's right. Maybe it's better if you just keep your distance." But that night, when Mara left Emma's dinner plate on the kitchen table, pot roast, carrots, fresh bread with honey, she saw the girl standing in the shadows of the hallway, watching. Their eyes met. Mara smiled just a little and went back to her dishes. The next morning, the plate was empty. She fell into a rhythm. Up at 4. Feed the starter. Start the stove. Bake bread. 4 loaves for the house. Extra on weekends for Jack's family in town. Breakfast at 6. Clean the kitchen. Prepare lunch. Bake more if needed. Start dinner. Clean again. Check the starter. Sleep. Her hands hardened. Her shoulders strengthened. The blisters became calluses. The bread got better. Cole never said so, but she noticed he started taking extra slices with his lunch. Jack praised every meal enthusiastically, and Emma's plates, left on the table every evening, were always empty by morning. On her 7th day, Mara made cinnamon rolls. She'd found cinnamon in the back of a cupboard, dusty but still fragrant. Sugar she had. Butter she'd started making herself from cream Jack brought from his sister's dairy. She rolled out the dough, spread it with butter and cinnamon sugar, rolled it tight, cut it into spirals, let them rise until they were puffy and soft. The smell when they baked was enough to make her want to cry. She was pulling them from the oven when she felt eyes on her again. Emma stood in the doorway, drawn by the scent, her expression hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. Mara frosted one while it was still hot, put it on a small plate, and set it on the table. "They're better warm," she said, not looking directly at the girl. "But they'll keep until breakfast if you'd rather wait." She went back to frosting the others, giving Emma space to decide. She heard small footsteps, heard the scrape of the chair, heard nothing for a long moment, then barely audible. "Thank you." Mara's hands stilled. She didn't turn around, didn't make a sound, just kept frosting, kept breathing, kept giving Emma the space to exist without pressure. After a while, she heard the chair scrape again, heard small feet retreat, turned to find the plate empty and her vision blurred with tears she had no right to shed. Emma had spoken. She didn't tell Cole, didn't tell Jack, kept the moment like a secret between her and the silent girl who was learning to find her voice again. But Emma started appearing in the kitchen more often. Never when Cole was around. She had some instinct for his schedule, knew when it was safe. She'd sit at the table, watching Mara work. Sometimes she'd help in small ways, fetching a spoon, pushing the flour barrel closer, holding the bowl steady while Mara kneaded. They didn't talk. Mara kept up a gentle stream of narration, explaining what she was doing, why she was doing it, what would happen next, and Emma listened. "The starter's alive," Mara explained one afternoon, showing Emma the bubbling jar. "See? It's full of yeast and bacteria, and they're eating the flour and making bubbles. They're like tiny workers, and they're what makes the bread rise. This starter came from my grandmother. She got it from her mother. It's probably 100 years old. Emma's eyes went wide. When I feed it, I'm feeding all those tiny creatures. And when I bake bread, I'm putting them to work. They eat the sugar in the flour and burp out carbon dioxide. That's the bubbles. And that's what makes bread soft and airy instead of flat and hard. Emma wrinkled her nose at burp, and Mara could have sworn she saw a smile. 2 weeks in, Emma spoke again. Can I help? Mara handed her a wooden spoon without hesitation. Stir this while I measure the salt. They worked together in comfortable silence, and when Cole came in for dinner, he stopped short at the sight of his daughter standing on a stool, carefully stirring batter under Mara's watchful eye. Emma. She's helping, Mara said calmly, not looking up from measuring. We're making cornbread. She could feel his anger, his fear, his desperate need to protect his daughter from one more person who might leave. But Emma kept stirring, focused, and content, and after a long moment, Cole just nodded and left. That night, Emma ate dinner at the table instead of taking her plate to her room. Cole noticed, said nothing, but Mara saw his hand shake slightly as he reached for the cornbread. 3 weeks in, the trouble found her. She was in town. Cole had sent her with a supply list and strict instructions to be back by 4. The general store was crowded, the proprietor was harried, and Mara was waiting for her order when she heard it. Well, well, Mary Cunningham! Awful long way from Boston. The voice turned her blood to ice. She turned slowly. Reggie Patterson stood 3 feet away, grinning like a cat with a mouse. He'd been one of Thomas's friends, not close, but close enough to know things, to have seen things. You've got the wrong person, Mara said steadily. My name is Mara Quinn. Sure it is. He moved closer, and she smelled whiskey. Does your new employer know his cook is wanted for questioning? Thomas is real concerned about you, Mary. Says you stole something valuable when you left. I stole nothing. That's not what he's telling the police. Reggie's smile widened. There's a reward, you know, $500 for information leading to your whereabouts. That's a lot of money. Around them, the store had gone quiet. People were listening now, watching. Mara's mind raced. $500 would buy a telegram, would bring Thomas here, would end everything she'd built. I'll give you 1,000, she said quietly, to forget you saw me. Reggie laughed. You don't have $1,000. Not yet, but I will. Give me 2 months. Why would I wait 2 months for maybe 1,000 when I can get 500 now for sure? Because if you send that telegram, Thomas will come here, and when he finds out I've moved on, he'll want to know who helped me disappear. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. He's not a forgiving man, Reggie. You know that. You've seen what he does when he's angry. Do you really want him knowing you found me first and took money to keep quiet? Doubt flickered across Reggie's face. He knew Thomas, knew what the man was capable of. 2 months, Mara repeated. $1,000. You never saw me. Everyone wins. He studied her, calculating. Finally, 1 month. And if you run, I'll find you again. I'm not running anymore. He left, and Mara stood in the store, shaking, trying to figure out how in hell she was going to get $1,000 in 30 days on a cook's salary. What? The answer came to her that night while she was feeding the starter. Bread. Not just bread for the household, bread to sell. The town was growing. Miners, railroad workers, families moving west for land and opportunity. They needed food, needed it fresh, needed it reliable. She could bake more, could sell loaves to the general store, to the hotel, to anyone who'd buy. It would mean longer hours, more work, but she'd done worse for less. The next morning, she approached Cole with her plan. No. Just listen. I said no. You're here to cook for this household, not to run a business out of my kitchen. It wouldn't interfere with my duties. I'd bake extra in the mornings, deliver it to town when I go for supplies. The general store owner already said he'd buy everything I can make. I don't care what he said. The answer is no. I'll give you half the profits for using your kitchen and supplies. That stopped him. Why do you need money so badly? Because a monster from my past found me and I have 30 days to buy his silence or my old life destroys my new one. Personal reasons. Not good enough. I'm in debt, she said, hating the half-truth. I need to pay it off before... She trailed off. Before the people you're running from catch up? Cole's eyes were sharp. I'm not stupid, Mara. You show up here with bruises and a new name. You jump every time someone knocks on the door. You look over your shoulder like you're expecting someone. Now you need money fast. What kind of trouble are you bringing to my house? The kind that will go away if I can pay them off. Or the kind that follows you no matter what. They stared at each other across the kitchen table. Emma was upstairs, safely out of earshot. Jack was in the fields. It was just the two of them, and the truth hanging between them like smoke. 1 month, Mara said. Give me 1 month to try. If it doesn't work, I'll drop it. If it causes any problems, I'll leave. But please, I'm asking for a chance. Something in her voice must have gotten through because Cole's expression softened fractionally. Half the profits, he said, and you keep up with your regular duties. And if this brings trouble to my door, to my daughter, it won't. It better not. She started baking at 3 in the morning instead of 4. 6 loaves for the house, 12 for sale. Then 18. Then 24. The general store couldn't keep them on the shelves. The hotel wanted more. Miners stopped her on the street, asking when she'd have more available. Her body screamed. She developed a permanent ache between her shoulder blades from kneading. Her hands, just healed, split open again. She slept 4 hours a night if she was lucky. But the money came in. $20 the first week, $35 the second, $50 the third. She kept it hidden in her mattress, counting it every night, watching it grow too slowly. She needed $800 more with 1 week left. Emma helped when she could, measuring flour, greasing pans, watching the oven. She talked more now, in her quiet way, asking questions about the bread, about Mara's grandmother, about the world beyond the ranch. Did you always want to bake? She asked one morning. No, Mara admitted. When I was your age, I wanted to be a teacher. Why didn't you? Because I was told girls like me didn't need education. Because I married young to escape a father who drank. Because I traded one prison for another and didn't realize until it was too late. Life got complicated, she said instead. Do you miss it? Where you came from? No. Me neither, Emma said softly. I don't miss before, when Mama was here. It hurt too much to talk, so I just stopped. Mara's hand stilled in the dough. What changed? You. Emma looked up at her with those 2 old eyes. You make the kitchen feel safe, like it's okay to make noise again. Mara had to turn away so Emma wouldn't see her cry. 4 days before Reggie's deadline, she was short $300. She'd pushed herself to the limit, 30 loaves a day, plus all her regular cooking, plus maintaining the starter, plus trying to sleep. She was standing at the stove, swaying with exhaustion, when Cole found her. You're going to kill yourself, he said bluntly. I'm fine. You're not fine. You can barely stand. When's the last time you slept more than 3 hours? I don't know. Tuesday? It's Friday. Then I guess Tuesday. She tried to focus on the bread, but the loaves were swimming. I just need a few more days. Mara. His hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. Stop. I can't. How much do you still need? She couldn't answer, couldn't admit she was failing, couldn't... 300, she whispered. Cole was quiet for a long moment, then... Consider it a loan, against future profits. I can't... Yes, you can, because if you collapse in my kitchen, Emma will be devastated, and I can't... His voice cracked. I can't watch her lose someone else. Mara turned to look at him, really look, saw the fear beneath the hardness, the love buried under all that grief. She's talking again, Mara said. Did you know? She talks to me in the kitchen. She's healing, Cole. I know. His hand was still on her shoulder. That's why I can't let you burn yourself out. She needs you. He stopped. The ranch needs you. I'll pay you back. I know you will. He handed her the money that night, cash from a metal box he kept hidden in his office. Didn't ask questions, didn't demand promises, just trusted her. The next morning, she met Reggie at the general store and gave him the full 1,000. Smart woman, he said, counting it. Thomas never appreciated what he had. Thomas never saw me as human. She looked him dead in the eye. If you tell him where I am, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows you blackmailed a woman running from her abuser. Think about how that'll play." Reggie's smile faded. "You've changed." "Yes," Mara said. "I have." She walked back to the ranch with empty pockets and a full heart, ready to rebuild what she'd spent to survive. Debt. Spring turned to summer. The bread business grew. Mara paid back Cole's loan in 6 weeks and started saving everything else. Emma bloomed like a desert flower, laughing now, singing sometimes, telling terrible jokes she learned from Jack. Cole softened, inch by inch, smile by smile. The ranch felt less like a hiding place and more like a home. And Mara Quinn, not Mary Cunningham, not the woman she'd been forced to be, took up space without apology. She filled the kitchen with warmth and bread and something that felt dangerously like hope. She didn't know that the land baron was watching, had noticed the ranch's slight uptick in fortune, was plotting how to crush it. She didn't know Thomas had received a different telegram from a different source and was already on a train heading west. She didn't know the real fight was just beginning, but she was stronger now, harder, more herself than she'd ever been. And when the trouble came, and it would come, she'd be ready. She'd survived too much to disappear now. The first sign of real trouble came on a Tuesday morning in late August, delivered by a man in an expensive suit who had no business being on a cattle ranch. Mara was pulling bread from the oven when she heard the horse. Not the usual sounds of ranch work. This was deliberate, slow, meant to announce arrival. She wiped flour from her hands and moved to the window. The man dismounted like he owned the ground beneath his feet. Late 50s, silver hair, clothes that cost more than most people made in a year. Behind him, 2 younger men sat on horseback, their faces hard and watchful. Cole came out of the barn, and even from a distance, Mara could see the tension in his shoulders. "Mr. Ashford." The silver-haired man's voice carried across the yard. "Beautiful morning. Mr. Thornton, didn't expect a visit. I thought it was time we had a conversation, man to man." Thornton gestured to the ranch with a sweep of his hand. "About the future of this valley." Mara moved closer to the door, staying out of sight but within earshot. Emma appeared beside her, silent and curious. "My future's fine," Cole said. "Don't need any help with it." Thornton laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. "That's where you're wrong. See, I've been buying up land in this valley for the past 5 years. Railways coming through, developments coming with it. Smart ranchers are selling now, getting good prices. Stubborn ones." He paused. "Well, they tend to regret it." "I'm not selling." "You haven't heard my offer yet." "Don't need to. This land's been in my family for 3 generations. It'll be here for 3 more. "Will it?" Thornton's tone sharpened. "Because from where I'm standing, you're barely holding on. You've got aging equipment, insufficient herd numbers, a workforce of 1 foreman. Your water rights are contested. Did you know that? There's a filing from 1867 that suggests the creek running through your property actually belongs to the county, not to you." Cole's hands clenched. "That's horseshit, and you know it." "Maybe. But it'll take a lawyer to prove it, and lawyers cost money. Money I hear you don't have." Thornton stepped closer. "I'm offering you a way out, $15,000. Enough to start over somewhere else. Somewhere easier. This is my home. This is dirt and memories. One of those has value, the other doesn't." Thornton's voice dropped. "I'm being generous because I respect what your family built here. But my generosity has limits. You have until the end of September to reconsider. After that, things get complicated." "Is that a threat?" "It's a timeline." Thornton mounted his horse smoothly. "Think about your daughter, Cole. Think about what's best for her. A failing ranch is no place to raise a child." They left in a cloud of dust, and Cole stood in the yard for a long time after, his fists clenched, staring at nothing. Mara pushed open the door and walked out to him. "How much of that did you hear?" he asked without turning. "Enough." "Is he right? About the water rights?" "I don't know. My father handled all that. The paperwork's probably in the office somewhere, buried under 20 years of other paperwork." He finally looked at her. 15,000 sounds like a lot until you realize land this size should be worth 3 times that. He's trying to steal it legal." "Can you fight him?" "With what? I've got maybe 2,000 in the bank. A lawyer would burn through that in a month, and that's if I could even find one willing to go against Thornton. He owns half the county, including the judge. Emma had come outside, standing close to Mara. Cole saw her and his expression softened, then hardened again. Go inside, sweetheart. Everything's fine. Papa, are we going to lose the ranch? The question hit him like a punch. No, we're not. But Mara heard the uncertainty in his voice, and she knew Emma did too. That night, after Emma was in bed, Mara found Cole in his office, surrounded by papers and ledgers, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his elbow. You're not going to find the answer in there, she said from the doorway. Maybe not, but I've got to try something. He rubbed his face. My great-grandfather died for this land. My grandfather nearly lost it twice and fought to keep it. My father broke his back working it, and I'm going to be the one who lets it go because I can't afford a damn lawyer. Mara stepped into the room, moved the whiskey bottle out of reach, and sat down across from him. Tell me about the water rights. Exactly what Thornton said. There's supposedly a filing from 1867 that gives Creek access to the county instead of individual landholders. If that's true, I'd need a permit to use the water, which Thornton could block, and without water, he gestured helplessly. No water, no cattle, no ranch. Do you have the original land grant? Somewhere. Why? Because if your great-grandfather was granted this land before 1867, his water rights would supersede any county filing. That's basic territorial law. She paused. My father was a clerk at a land office. I grew up reading property documents. Cole stared at her. You never mentioned that. You never asked about my life before. She met his eyes. I know things, Cole. I'm not just a cook who showed up with bruises. I had a whole existence before this, and some of it was even useful. For the first time since Thornton's visit, something like hope crossed his face. If I find the land grant, can you read it? Tell me what we're dealing with? I can try. They worked until 2 a.m, digging through boxes of papers that hadn't been touched in decades. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, bills of sale for long-dead cattle, receipts for equipment that had rusted into dust, Cole's family history in paper and ink, and fading photographs. And finally, at the bottom of a trunk that smelled like mildew and thyme, they found it. The land grant, dated April 1851, granting Colin Ashford and his heirs full rights to 640 acres, including all water sources therein. Mara read it 3 times, checking the language, the signatures, the official seals. This is ironclad. Any county filing from 1867 wouldn't matter. This predates it and specifically grants water rights. Thornton's bluffing. Or he's hoping I don't have the documentation to prove it. Well, now you do. She handed him the grant carefully. You need to get this recorded at the county office. Make it official, make it public. Then even if Thornton has a judge in his pocket, he can't touch your water. Cole took the document like it was made of gold. How did you know where to look? What to look for? Because men like Thornton always use the same tactics. They find people who are vulnerable, who don't know how to fight back, and they use complicated language to make simple theft sound legal. Her voice had gone cold. I've seen it before. Different setting, same game. He studied her face in the lamplight. What happened to you back east? Nothing I want to talk about tonight. She stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you ride to town and file this, and we figure out what happens next. Mara. His hand caught her wrist, gentle. Thank you. She looked down at his calloused fingers against her skin, so different from the last man who'd grabbed her there. You gave me a chance when I needed one. I'm just returning the favor. But they both knew it had become more than that. The next morning, Cole rode to town with the land grant, accompanied by Jack in case Thornton had people watching. Mara kept to her routine, bread, breakfast, cleaning, but her mind was racing. Thornton wouldn't stop with the water rights. Men like him never did. If one threat failed, they found another. They pushed until something broke. Emma was quieter than usual, helping in the kitchen with distracted hands. Are you scared? She asked suddenly. Of what? Of Mr. Thornton. Of leaving. Mara set down her mixing bowl and knelt so they were eye level. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you. Your father's going to fight this, and we're going to help him. How? Good question. Mara had been thinking about that all morning. The bread business brought in decent money, but not enough to hire lawyers or buy influence. They needed something bigger, something that would bring attention, resources, allies. I don't know yet, she admitted, but we'll figure it out. Emma bit her lip. Mama always said that when things got hard, you had to be harder. Your mama was a smart woman. I miss her. Emma's voice was small. But I'm glad you're here. Is that bad? No, sweetheart. That's not bad at all. Mara pulled her into a hug, feeling the girl's thin shoulders shake with the tears she'd been holding in. You can miss her and still let new people into your life. That's not betrayal. That's surviving. They stayed like that until Emma's breathing steadied, then got back to work. The bread didn't care about their problems. It still needed kneading, rising, baking. Cole returned that afternoon with news both good and bad. The grants filed, he announced, dropping into a kitchen chair like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. County clerk verified it, recorded it, made it official. Water rights are secure. That's good, Mara said. What's the bad? Thornton was at the office when I got there. He saw me file. Didn't say a word, just watched with this smile like he knew something I didn't. Cole accepted the coffee she poured him. Then on the way out, one of his men stopped me. Said Thornton wants to meet tomorrow, noon, at the Riverside Hotel. That's a trap. Probably, but I can't not go. Then we all go, Mara said firmly. You, me, Jack, safety in numbers. I'm not dragging you into this. You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm walking in with my eyes open. She met his gaze. I know men like Thornton, Cole. I know how they operate, and I know that going alone makes you vulnerable. Jack, leaning against the doorframe, nodded. She's right. Thornton's the type to have witnesses swear you threatened him, started a fight, whatever serves his purpose. We should all be there. Cole looked between them, then at Emma, who was watching from the corner with worried eyes. Fine, he said finally, but Emma stays here with Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen was Jack's sister, lived on a small farm 3 miles east. I'm not having her anywhere near this. Emma didn't argue, which told Mara exactly how scared the girl was. The next day, they left Emma with Mrs. Chen and rode into town. The Riverside Hotel was the fanciest building for 50 miles. 2 stories, painted white, with actual glass windows and carpets imported from back east. Thornton held court there like a king in his castle. They found him in the dining room, finishing what looked like a very expensive lunch. He waved them over with the casual authority of someone used to being obeyed. Mr. Ashford, and you've brought friends. How democratic. His eyes landed on Mara. I don't believe we've been introduced. Mara Quinn, I work at the ranch. Ah, the famous baker. I've heard about your bread. Half the town raves about it. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Enterprising, starting a business on someone else's property, very American. I pay Mr. Ashford for the use of his kitchen and supplies. It's all above board. I'm sure it is. Thornton turned back to Cole. I understand you filed your land grant yesterday. Very thorough of you. Just protecting what's mine. Of course. Though I have to wonder, if you're so secure in your ownership, why do you look so worried? Thornton leaned back in his chair. See, the thing about old land grants is they're wonderful for establishing historical claims, but they don't address current debts. Cole's expression didn't change. I don't have any debts. No? That's interesting, because the First National Bank has a different understanding. Seems there's a loan taken out by your father in 1882. $2,500 at 6% interest, compounding annually, never paid off. Mara felt ice spread through her chest. Compound interest over 44 years on that amount would be astronomical. That loan was settled, Cole said, but she heard uncertainty in his voice. Do you have documentation? Silence. I didn't think so. Thornton pulled a paper from his jacket and slid it across the table. The bank president is a friend of mine. He did some digging in the old records and found this. Promissory note, signed by Colin Ashford, dated August 1882. No record of payment. The current amount due, with interest, is, he paused for effect, $41,673. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. That's impossible, Jack said. Cole's father would have mentioned, would he? Or did he assume it was handled and simply forgot about it in the chaos of running a ranch? Thornton's voice was almost sympathetic. These things happen. Records get lost, people forget, but the debt remains. Cole's face had gone white. I can't pay that. I know, which is why I'm prepared to be reasonable. Sell me the ranch for $20,000. I'll settle the debt with the bank. You'll walk away with enough to start over somewhere else. Everyone wins. Except Cole loses his family's land for half what it's worth, Mara said sharply. Thornton's eyes turned to her, colder now. Miss Quinn, this is a private business matter. It stopped being private when you started manipulating bank records to steal a man's property. Careful with accusations like that. They tend to invite legal complications. So does fraud. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Thornton's pleasant mask slipped, showing something harder underneath. You're new here, Miss Quinn, so let me educate you. This valley operates by certain rules. People who understand those rules prosper. People who don't, he shrugged, well, they tend to leave. Or worse. Jack's hand moved toward his belt, and Mara saw one of Thornton's men tense. This was about to get ugly. We need time, Cole said, his voice strained. To verify this debt, check our records. You have until September 30th. That's when the bank intends to foreclose. Thornton stood, smoothing his jacket. Of course, if you sell to me before then, the whole messy business goes away. Think about it, Mr. Ashford. Think about what's best for that little girl of yours. He left with his men, and the three of them sat in silence, processing what had just happened. That promissory note could be fake, Jack said finally. We should get a lawyer to look at it. With what money? Cole's voice was dead. And even if it is fake, proving it would cost more than I have. He's got me either way. Mara stared at the paper Thornton had left behind. The signature looked genuine, the bank seal authentic, but something about it felt wrong. The paper was too clean for a document supposedly 44 years old. The ink too fresh. Can I keep this? She asked. Cole shrugged. Why? Because I want to check something. Back at the ranch, after Emma was safely in bed and Cole had retreated to his office with the whiskey bottle, Mara sat in the kitchen with the promissory note under lamplight. She'd seen enough forged documents in her old life. Thomas had been fond of signing her name to things without her knowledge, creating debts she'd known nothing about. She'd learned to spot the tells, hesitation marks in signatures, ink that didn't match the supposed date, paper stock that was wrong for the era. This note had all of those signs. The signature was close but not quite right, too smooth, lacking the natural variation of an actual pen stroke. The paper was modern stock, not the rougher texture common in the 1880s. And the ink, when she held it at an angle, showed a slight sheen that suggested recent application. It was a good forgery, but it was still a forgery. The question was how to prove it. She was still thinking when Jack knocked on the kitchen door, looking grim. We've got a problem. Lost 6 head of cattle tonight. Found them at the bottom of Miller's Canyon with broken legs. Someone drove them over deliberately. Thornton. Can't prove it, but yeah, this is what he does. Pushes until you break. Jack sat down heavily. Cole's talking about accepting the offer. Says it's better than losing everything. We're not losing anything. Mara, I appreciate the optimism, but that promissory note is fake. I'm sure of it. Jack's expression shifted. Can you prove it? Maybe. But even if I can, we need more than that. We need leverage, something that makes Thornton back off completely. They talked until dawn, building a plan that was probably insane, but might just work. It required the bread business to become something much bigger, much faster. It required help from people who had no reason to help them. It required Mara to step into a spotlight she'd been avoiding since she arrived, but it was the only shot they had. The next morning, Mara rode into town alone. She went to the general store first, where Mrs. Patterson, no relation to Reggie, thankfully, had been buying her bread since the beginning. I need a favor, Mara said. A big one. Mrs. Patterson listened to the pitch, her expression skeptical. You want to turn the Riverside Hotel's Harvest Festival into a bread competition? With prize money? Not just any prize money, big enough to draw attention, press attention, people from other towns, maybe even Sacramento. Make it an event. Why would I do that? Because Thornton's trying to force out the Ashfords, and if he succeeds, he'll own half the valley. Then he'll start squeezing everyone else. Your store, your suppliers, every small business in this town. Mara leaned forward. But if we can create something that brings outside attention, that shows this town is thriving without his control, it changes the narrative, makes it harder for him to operate in the shadows. Mrs. Patterson considered this. I'd need sponsors, other businesses to put up prize money. I'll help you find them. And you're sure you can win? Mara smiled, sharp and confident. I've been baking since before I could read, trust me. Over the next 2 weeks, Mara worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She baked 40 loaves a day, selling to every business that would buy. She talked to merchants, to farmers, to anyone who'd listen, building support for the Harvest Festival idea. She convinced the hotel owner that the publicity would be worth it. She got the local newspaper, such as it was, to agree to cover the event, and slowly, impossibly, it came together. The Harvest Festival was scheduled for September 28th, 2 days before Thornton's deadline. Prize money totaled $500. Not enough to save the ranch, but enough to matter. More importantly, it would draw crowds, attention, witnesses. Cole watched all of this with something between hope and disbelief. You really think this will work? He asked one night. I think it's better than giving up. He looked at her for a long moment. You didn't have to do this. You could have left, found work somewhere else, stayed out of it. I could have. But then I'd be running again, and I'm done with that. She met his eyes. This ranch is the first place I've felt like myself in years. Emma is the first person I've loved without fear in longer than that. And you... She stopped, surprised by her own honesty. You've given me a reason to fight, so yeah, I'm fighting. Something shifted in Cole's expression. He reached for her hand, tentative, giving her room to pull away. She didn't. After this is over, he said quietly, we should talk. About what happens next. About what this, he gestured between them, might become. After this is over, Mara agreed, we'll have that conversation. But first, they had to survive what was coming. The night before the festival, Emma couldn't sleep. Mara found her in the kitchen, sitting in the dark. What if they don't like your bread? The girl asked. Then I'll make better bread next time. What if Mr. Thornton does something bad? Then we'll deal with it together. Mara sat down beside her. Emma, I need you to understand something. Bad things might happen. We might lose this fight, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Sometimes trying is the whole point. Mama used to say that too. She sounds like she was very wise. Emma leaned against Mara's shoulder. I'm glad you came here. Even if everything goes wrong, I'm still glad. Mara's throat tightened. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. The morning of the festival dawned clear and bright, like the world was holding its breath. Mara was up at 2, preparing the bread that would either save them or mark the end of her time here. She'd chosen her best recipes: sourdough, honey wheat, rosemary olive oil, cinnamon swirl. 4 types, each one perfect, each one carrying all the skill and heart she possessed. Emma helped, quiet and focused. Cole and Jack prepared the wagon to transport everything. By sunrise, they were ready. The town was already crowded when they arrived. Farmers from neighboring valleys, families from as far as 50 miles away, drawn by the promise of competition and celebration. The festival had grown beyond what Mara had imagined. There would be pie contests, livestock shows, music and dancing. And in the center of it all, the bread competition. Thornton was there, of course, watching from the hotel balcony, his expression unreadable. Mara set up her station, arranging the loaves with care. Around her, other bakers did the same. Mrs. Patterson, the hotel cook, 3 women from neighboring farms. Good bakers, all of them. This wouldn't be easy. The judges were the mayor, a food critic from Sacramento who happened to be visiting family, and the hotel owner. Fair enough. The tasting began at noon. Mara watched as they worked through each baker's offerings, making notes, conferring quietly. When they reached her table, she saw their expressions change, saw the surprise, then the appreciation. Her bread was that good. But as they deliberated, she noticed Thornton descend from his balcony and approach the judges. Saw him lean in, whisper something. Saw the mayor's face tighten. No, he wasn't going to steal this too. The announcement came at 2 o'clock. The mayor stood on the platform, looking uncomfortable. It was a difficult decision. All the entries were exceptional, but the judges have decided. He paused, and Mara knew from the way he couldn't meet her eyes, knew from Thornton's slight smile, The winner is Mrs. Helen Green for her outstanding rye bread. The crowd applauded. Mrs. Green looked genuinely shocked and delighted, and Mara stood there, numb, watching $500 and her last hope disappear. Emma grabbed her hand, squeezing tight. Cole's face had gone hard. Jack looked ready to start a fight. But then the food critic from Sacramento stepped forward, interrupting the mayor mid-sentence. "Excuse me, but I need to say something." He turned to the crowd. "The mayor is correct that all entries were exceptional. However, in my professional opinion, Miss Quinn's sourdough was the finest bread I've tasted west of the Mississippi. The texture, the flavor profile, the crust, it was technically perfect and artistically inspired." The mayor sputtered. "But we already announced—" "You announced the local winner. I'm offering a different prize." The critic looked directly at Mara. "Miss Quinn, I write for the Sacramento Gazette. I'd like to feature your work in next month's edition. And I know several restaurant owners who would be very interested in a regular supply of bread of this quality. If you're interested, we should talk about commercial arrangements." The crowd murmured. This wasn't prize money, but it was something potentially more valuable. Recognition, connections, a future. Mara found her voice. "I'm interested." Thornton's smile had vanished. That evening, after the festival ended and the crowds dispersed, after they'd loaded up the wagon and started home, Cole finally spoke. "That critic, that was luck." "Maybe," Mara said, "or maybe good bread finds its way to people who appreciate it. Either way, it doesn't solve the bank problem. We've still got 2 days." "I know." She pulled out the promissory note, which she'd been carrying since the meeting. "But I've been thinking about this. The note is fake, I'm certain, but proving it won't help us. What we need is to prove Thornton's behind the forgery." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I'm working on it." They rode in silence, Emma asleep between them, the sunset painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. The ranch appeared ahead, familiar now, beloved, worth fighting for. Whatever came next, Mara knew she wouldn't face it alone anymore. That was something. Maybe it was everything. The answer came at 3 a.m, jerking Mara awake with the kind of clarity that only exists in the darkest hours. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, replaying Thornton's words from the hotel meeting. "The bank president is a friend of mine. He did some digging in the old records that would be stored in the bank vault. Records that would show whether the promissory note was genuine or whether it had been conveniently discovered only after Thornton decided he wanted the Ashford land." She pulled on her dress and boots, moving quietly through the dark house. Cole was asleep in his room, Emma in hers. The kitchen was cold, the stove banked for the night. She lit a lamp and sat at the table, thinking. Breaking into a bank wasn't just illegal, it was insane. She'd go to prison. Or worse, if Thornton caught her, she'd simply disappear. Men with that kind of power didn't tolerate threats. But sitting here doing nothing while Cole lost everything wasn't an option either. "Can't sleep?" She jumped, nearly knocking over the lamp. Cole stood in the doorway, wearing pants and an undershirt, his hair standing up in all directions. "You scared me half to death." "Sorry, saw your light." He moved into the kitchen, checking the stove automatically before sitting across from her. "What are you thinking about?" She should lie. Should tell him she was planning tomorrow's bread, worrying about supply orders, anything but the truth. "I'm thinking about breaking into the First National Bank," she said instead. Cole blinked. "What?" "The promissory note. If it's fake, there won't be any corresponding records in the bank's archives. The loan your father supposedly took out would have generated paperwork, applications, approval documents, payment ledgers. If none of that exists, it proves Thornton manufactured the debt. And you plan to find this out by breaking into the bank. Unless you have a better idea." "Yeah, not committing a felony." Cole rubbed his face. "Mara, even if you're right, even if you could get in there without getting caught, which you can't just walk into a courtroom with stolen evidence. I don't need to use it in court. I need to use it against Thornton. Proof that he's committing fraud, threatening his position, his reputation. It becomes leverage. Or it becomes a death sentence. You think Thornton won't kill someone who threatens to expose him?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to examine. "He might," Mara admitted, "but I've survived worse than Thornton, and I'm tired of letting men like him win. Cole studied her face in the lamplight. This is about more than the ranch, isn't it? Everything's about more than we pretend it is. She met his eyes. I spent 3 years married to a man who controlled every aspect of my life. Where I went, who I spoke to, what I wore, what I thought. He used money, social pressure, legal manipulation, anything to keep me trapped. And when I finally left, he tried to hunt me down like an animal. Her voice hardened. Thornton's using different tools, but it's the same game. Control through fear and power. And I swore when I got on that stagecoach that I'd never let anyone make me powerless again. So this is about revenge. No, this is about refusing to be a victim. She leaned forward. Cole, I'm going to do this whether you help me or not. I'd rather do it with your support, but I'll manage without it if I have to. He was quiet for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed, deep and resigned. You're absolutely insane. You know that, right? I've been called worse. Fine, but we do this smart. We plan it properly, we have backup, and we don't get caught. He stood, moved to his office, and came back with paper and a pencil. Tell me everything you know about bank security. They spent the rest of the night planning what was probably the stupidest thing either of them had ever attempted. The bank closed at 5 o'clock. The vault would be locked, but the office area, where older records were stored, might be accessible through a back window. Jack had mentioned once that his cousin worked as a janitor there, had keys to everything except the vault itself. Getting those keys would require convincing Jack's cousin to betray his employer, which seemed unlikely, unless they could offer him something valuable enough to outweigh the risk. How much money do we have? Mara asked. Cole checked his ledger. About $1,800. Why? Because I'm guessing Jack's cousin doesn't make much as a janitor. Offer him $200 for an hour with those keys, no questions asked. That's probably 6 months' wages. And if he reports us? Then we're arrested and Thornton gets the ranch anyway. We're already gambling. Might as well bet everything. Jack, when they approached him the next morning, looked at them like they'd lost their minds. You want to do what? Break into the bank. Tonight. We need your cousin's help. Cole laid out the plan quickly, watching Jack's expression cycle through disbelief, horror, and resignation. My cousin Miguel's got 6 kids and a wife who'll kill him if he loses this job. Which is why we're paying him enough that even if he does lose it, he'll be fine for months. Mara kept her voice calm, reasonable. 1 hour. He gives us the keys, goes home, and tomorrow morning when the break-in is discovered, he's as shocked as everyone else. And if someone sees you, if the night watchman checks the building, there is no night watchman. Budget cuts last year. Jack had mentioned this weeks ago, complaining about how the town was getting cheap about security. The building's empty from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. Jack looked between them, then out at the ranch, the land they were trying to save. Finally, he nodded. I'll talk to Miguel. But Mara, you're staying here. Cole and I can handle this. No, this isn't a debate. You're right. It's not. Because I'm the only one who knows what to look for in those records. I spent 2 years watching my husband manipulate financial documents. I know how banks file things, what ledgers matter, what evidence we need. She crossed her arms. You need me. Cole intervened before Jack could argue further. She's right, and we're wasting time. Jack, talk to Miguel. Find out if he'll do it. Mara and I will finalize the rest of the plan. Jack left, still shaking his head, and Mara spent the rest of the day trying to function normally, while her mind raced with everything that could go wrong. Emma noticed something was off. You're worried, she said while they kneaded dough together that afternoon. A little. About the ranch? About a lot of things. Mara shaped the dough carefully, trying to keep her hand steady. Emma, if something happens, if I have to go away for a while, I need you to know that it's not because I want to leave. Okay? Emma's hand stilled. You're scaring me. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. How did you explain to an 8-year-old that you were about to commit a crime to save her home? Sometimes adults have to do difficult things that might not make sense. But it doesn't mean we don't love you. Are you in trouble? Not yet. And if everything goes right, I won't be. Mara pulled her into a hug, flour dusting both of them. Trust me, sweetheart. Just trust me. Jack returned at 4 with news that Miguel had agreed. $200, the keys for 1 hour, and he'd spend the evening visiting his sister 2 towns over so he had an alibi. He thinks we're insane, Jack reported, But his youngest needs surgery that the family can't afford, so the money convinced him. He'll leave the keys under the back step at 6:30, wants them back by 7:30 at the latest. 1 hour, 60 minutes to search decades of records, find what they needed, and get out without being seen. They had dinner early. Emma was quiet, picking at her food, watching them with worried eyes. Cole tried to act normal but kept checking the clock. Mara couldn't eat at all. At 6:15, after Emma was supposedly in bed, though Mara suspected she was listening from the hallway, they prepared to leave. Dark clothes, soft-soled boots, a single lantern that Cole had modified with panels to direct the light downward. They looked like criminals because that's exactly what they were about to become. "Last chance to back out," Cole said, his hand on the door. Mara thought about Thomas, about the years of being controlled and silenced, about Thornton's smug smile and the casual cruelty of powerful men, about Emma's voice, finally speaking again, and this ranch that had become more home than anywhere she'd ever lived. "I'm not backing out." They rode to town in silence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of red and orange. Appropriate, Mara thought, blood and fire. The keys were where Miguel had promised, tucked under the back step of the bank. Cole retrieved them, and they moved to the rear entrance, staying in the shadows. The street was quiet. Most people were home for dinner. The bank loomed above them, all brick and authority, a temple to money and power. The key turned with a soft click. The door opened. They slipped inside and locked it behind them. The back office was dark and cramped, smelling of paper and dust and old ink. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each one labeled with date ranges. They needed 1882, which should be in the far cabinet based on the organization system. Cole lit the lantern while Mara started searching. The files were organized by year, then by type: commercial loans, personal loans, property transfers, deposits. She found 1882 and started pulling folders, scanning contents in the dim light. "What exactly are we looking for?" Cole whispered. "Anything with your father's name, loan applications, promissory notes, payment records. If the loan was real, there should be a trail." She kept searching, her hands moving faster as minutes ticked by. "Also look for anything that seems recent. New paper, fresh ink, documents that don't match the age they're supposed to be." They worked in tense silence, the only sounds the rustle of paper and their breathing. 10 minutes passed. 20. Mara's initial confidence was starting to crack. What if Thornton had been smart enough to create a complete false trail? What if the evidence was already destroyed? Then Cole made a soft sound. "Mara, look at this." He held a folder labeled Ashford, Property Records. Inside were documents dating back to 1851, the original land grant they'd already seen, plus subsequent property transfers, tax records, surveys. All legitimate, all properly filed. But at the bottom of the folder was something that didn't belong. A promissory note dated 1882 for $2,500. The same note Thornton had shown them, except this one was clearly the original. The paper was period correct, yellowed with age. The ink had faded naturally, and most importantly, stamped across it in red ink was a single word: satisfied, paid in full. In 1891. "He lied," Cole breathed. "The debt was settled 35 years ago. And Thornton created a duplicate without the satisfaction mark, made it look legitimate, and counted on you not having access to the original to dispute it." Mara's hands were shaking with rage. "He's been planning this for a while. Probably bought off someone at the bank to hide this file, make sure you never saw it. So we take this, show it to the judge, prove Thornton's a fraud, and prove we broke into the bank to get it, which invalidates it as evidence and gets us arrested." Mara was thinking fast. "We can't take it, but we can document it." She pulled out the small camera she'd borrowed from Mrs. Patterson, a Kodak Brownie, simple enough for anyone to use. In the lamplight, she carefully photographed the satisfied note, the file folder, and several other documents that showed the legitimate paper trail. They were replacing the files when they heard it. Footsteps outside. A key in the front door lock. Cole doused the lantern instantly. They stood frozen in the dark, listening to someone enter the building. The footsteps were deliberate, unhurried. Whoever it was had every right to be there. Through the crack under the office door, they saw a lamplight, heard papers rustling. Someone was in the main banking hall doing late work or checking something. They had maybe 5 minutes before the person decided to check the back offices. Cole grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the rear door. They moved silently, feeling their way in the darkness. His hand found the door handle, turned it slowly. It didn't budge. The door had locked behind them when they'd closed it. They needed the key to get out, but the keys were still in the lock on the inside. Removing them now would make noise. The footsteps were getting closer. Mara's mind raced. They could hide. There was a supply closet in the corner, but if the person was thorough, they'd be found. They could try to rush out the front, but that meant confrontation, identification, the end of everything. Or they could do something incredibly stupid. She grabbed Cole's arm and pulled him toward the supply closet just as the office door opened and lamplight flooded the room. They pressed against the back wall of the closet, barely breathing, watching through the crack as a figure moved into the office. It was Thornton. He moved to the filing cabinets, pulled open the drawer containing the Ashford files, and began searching. Mara's heart hammered. He was checking to make sure the satisfied promissory note was still hidden, still safe from discovery. But his hand paused. He pulled out a file, studied it, and his expression changed. Something was wrong. Had they left something out of place? A folder slightly askew? Thornton turned slowly, scanning the room. His eyes passed over the closet door once, then returned. "I know someone's here," he said conversationally. "Miguel's keys are missing from his usual spot, and there's a lamp that's still warm, so why don't you come out and we can discuss this like civilized people?" Silence. "No? Fine." He pulled something from his coat. In the lamplight, Mara saw the glint of metal. A gun. "I'll count to 3. If you're not out by then, I start shooting through doors." 1. Cole's hand tightened on hers. 2. She could feel him preparing to step out, to sacrifice himself to keep her hidden. She stepped out first. Thornton's smile was arctic. "Miss Quinn, how unsurprising. And Mr. Ashford, I presume you're here as well?" Cole emerged from the closet, his face hard. "We know about the satisfied note. We know the debt was paid off in 1891. You're committing fraud. Prove it." "Oh wait, you can't, because any evidence you found here is inadmissible due to your illegal entry." Thornton gestured with the gun. "This is breaking and entering, possibly theft if I decide you took anything. That's prison time. Unless—" he paused. "Unless we make a deal." "We're not dealing with you," Mara said. "No? Even if the alternative is watching Mr. Ashford go to prison, leaving that little girl of his with no father and no home?" Thornton's voice was almost kind. "I'm offering you a way out. Sign over the ranch. I'll forget this ever happened. Everyone walks away." "Everyone except Cole loses his land," Mara shot back. "Cole was losing it anyway. This way he stays out of jail. I'd call that a win." Thornton pulled out a pre-prepared document from his coat. Of course he had it ready. He'd probably planned this entire scenario. "Sign it now, or I call the sheriff. Your choice." Cole looked at the paper, then at Mara, then back at Thornton. She could see him calculating, weighing his options. Saw the moment he decided to give up, to protect her and Emma from the consequences of his actions. "No," Mara said before he could speak. "There's another option." Thornton raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "You call the sheriff, we all go down. Because I'm willing to bet that satisfied note isn't the only evidence of your fraud. If the law starts digging into your business practices, what else will they find? How many other properties have you stolen using manufactured debts?" She stepped closer, ignoring the gun. "You've built your empire on lies and forgery. One serious investigation and it all falls apart. You think anyone will believe criminals over me? I think the Sacramento Gazette will be very interested in the story. I think the food critic who loved my bread will love this even more. Local baron exposed as fraud, using his power to crush honest ranchers. It's exactly the kind of scandal that sells papers." Her voice was steady now, certain. "You shoot us. It becomes a murder investigation. You have us arrested. We talk to every newspaper between here and San Francisco. Either way, your reputation is destroyed." For the first time, Thornton's confidence wavered. "You're bluffing. Try me. I've already lost everything once. I'm not afraid of losing it again. But you?" She smiled, cold and sharp. "You've got a lot to lose. Money, power, respect. All of it built on a foundation of fraud that one determined reporter could demolish." The silence stretched. Thornton's gun hand lowered slightly. Then the back door crashed open and Jack charged in with a rifle, followed by Miguel and 3 other men Mara didn't recognize. "Drop it, Thornton!" Jack's voice was hard as iron. "I swear to any power that's listening, I will shoot you where you stand." Thornton looked at the men, at the rifles, at his suddenly very poor odds. Slowly, he set the gun on the desk. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Jack replied. "It is." "Miguel, you get all that?" Miguel held up a notebook. "Every word, including the part where he admitted to manufacturing the debt and committing fraud." Thornton's face went white. "You set this up." "We planned for possibilities," Mara said. "Turns out you're predictable. Men like you always are." Cole stepped forward and took the gun from the desk. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw your claim on the ranch. You're going to tell the bank the promissory note was an error. And you're going to leave my family alone." "Or what?" "Or Miguel's testimony, combined with the photographs I took of the satisfied note, go to every newspaper west of the Mississippi. Your choice." Thornton stood there, trapped by his own arrogance, and Mara watched him realize he'd lost. It was beautiful. "Fine," he said finally, "but don't think this is over. I have resources you can't imagine, ways of making problems disappear." "So do I," Mara said quietly. "And I've survived worse than you. Don't forget that." They left him standing in the bank office, defeated but dangerous. Jack and his men escorted them out while Miguel locked up, making sure everything looked undisturbed. On the ride home, Cole was quiet. Finally, he said, "You planned the backup, the witnesses. I told you I'd survived worse than Thornton. I learned from it." Mara looked at him. Men like that, they always underestimate women. Think we're too scared or too stupid to outmaneuver them. It's their biggest weakness. "Remind me never to underestimate you." She smiled despite the adrenaline still flooding her system. "I'll do my best." But as they rode through the darkness toward home, she couldn't shake the feeling that Thornton's final words had been a promise, not a threat. The ranch appeared ahead, lamplight glowing in the kitchen window. Emma had stayed up, waiting. When they walked in, she ran to Cole, throwing her arms around him. "You're okay. You're both okay." "We're fine, sweetheart." He held her tight. "Everything's going to be fine." But later that night, after Emma was finally asleep and the adrenaline had worn off, Mara sat in the kitchen and let herself shake. They'd won this round, but Thornton wasn't finished. Men with that kind of power didn't accept defeat gracefully. She was checking the starter, trying to ground herself in familiar routine, when she heard the horse, single rider, moving fast. Her stomach dropped. It was past midnight. Nobody rode at this hour unless there was trouble. Cole heard it too, peered from his room with his rifle. Jack came from the bunkhouse. They moved to the door together. The rider pulled up in a cloud of dust. In the lamplight from the house, Mara saw a woman she didn't recognize, breathing hard, her face panicked. "Mrs. Chen sent me," the woman gasped. "There's a man at her house asking about a woman named Mary Cunningham, asking if she's seen her, if she knows where she might be." The woman's eyes found Mara. "He says he's her husband, says he's come to take her home." The world tilted. Thomas. Thomas was here. Cole's hand found hers, steady and strong. "When?" "He showed up an hour ago. Mrs. Chen told him she didn't know anyone by that name, but he didn't believe her. He's still there, waiting, watching." The woman looked terrified. "Mrs. Chen said to warn you, said to tell Mara that the monster found her." Mara's throat closed. After everything, after surviving Reggie's blackmail and Thornton's threats, after building a new life and finding people worth fighting for, her past had finally caught up. Thomas was here, and he wouldn't leave without her. "Get inside," Cole said, his voice deadly calm. "Jack, wake the others. We need to secure the perimeter." "Cole, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." He turned to her, his expression fierce. "You think I'm letting some bastard from your past take you? You think after everything, I'm just going to hand you over?" He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "You're not going anywhere. We'll handle this. Together." Emma appeared in the doorway, woken by the commotion. "What's happening?" Mara couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. The room was spinning and she was back in Boston, trapped in a house that was supposed to be a home but was actually a prison. listening to Thomas's footsteps coming down the hall, knowing what came next. Mara. Cole's voice cut through the panic. Look at me. You're not alone this time. You hear me? You're not alone. She forced herself to focus on his face, on the strength there, on the promise in his eyes. I'm not alone, she whispered. That's right. And anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first. Outside, the night had gone very quiet. Somewhere in the darkness, Thomas was searching for her, and somewhere closer, Thornton was probably planning his next move. But inside this kitchen, surrounded by people who'd become family, Mara made a decision. She was done running, done being afraid, done letting men, any men, control her life. If Thomas wanted her, he'd have to fight for her, and this time she'd fight back, with everything she had. Emma's small hand slipped into Mara's, pulling her back from the edge of panic. The girl's eyes were wide but steady, trusting in a way that made Mara's chest ache. Who's coming? Emma asked quietly. Mara knelt down, keeping her voice level despite the terror clawing at her throat. Someone from my old life. Someone I hoped would never find me. The monster you ran from? The simple truth of it, spoken in a child's voice, steadied something in Mara. She wasn't the same woman who'd fled Boston 4 months ago. She'd built something here. She'd fought for it, and she'd be damned if she let Thomas destroy it. Yes, but he's just a man, Emma, and men can be stopped. Cole was already moving, issuing orders to Jack and the ranch hands who'd gathered in the yard. Miguel, take the women to the root cellar. It's got one entrance, easy to defend. Jack, you and Tom watch the north approach. I'll take the barn, cover the main road. No. Mara stood, her legs shaky, but her voice firm. I'm not hiding in a cellar while Thomas terrorizes everyone I care about. That's what he wants. Me scared, isolated, easy to control. Mara, this isn't the time to be stubborn. This is exactly the time. She moved to the kitchen counter, pulled out the largest knife she owned. The weight of it in her hand was both terrifying and empowering. He came 3,000 miles to drag me back. That means he's not just angry, he's obsessed. Hiding won't make him leave, it'll just drag this out. Cole's jaw tightened. So what do you suggest? I talk to him. Out in the open, with witnesses. I tell him the truth, that I'm never coming back, that our marriage is over, that if he doesn't leave, I'll press charges for the abuse. Her hand trembled slightly on the knife handle. He's a coward who only feels powerful when he's hurting someone weaker. Take away the privacy, the control, and he's nothing. Or he shoots you in front of witnesses and claims you attacked him first, Jack said flatly. Rich men get away with that all the time. He wasn't wrong. Mara had seen Thomas talk his way out of consequences before, watched him charm police officers and judges with the same ease he used to manipulate her. But she'd also seen him falter when confronted publicly, when his carefully constructed image was threatened. Then we make sure there are too many witnesses for him to kill, she said. And we have leverage he doesn't know about. She turned to the woman who'd brought the warning. Can you ride back to Mrs. Chen's? Tell her to gather every neighbor within 5 miles. Tell them there's a man threatening violence against a woman, and we need witnesses. Make it loud, make it public. The woman nodded and was gone, her horse kicking up dust as she disappeared into the darkness. Cole was staring at Mara like he'd never seen her before. You've thought this through. I've had 4 months to imagine this moment. I'm not leaving anything to chance. She met his eyes. But I need you to promise me something. If this goes wrong, if he manages to take me, that's not happening. Promise me, she insisted. If it does, you'll take care of Emma. You'll make sure she knows I didn't leave by choice. And you'll keep the ranch. Don't let my mess destroy what you've built. Mara, promise me, Cole. His hands came up to frame her face, rough and gentle at once. I promise. But you're not leaving. You hear me? We're ending this tonight. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the strength she'd found here would be enough, but she'd underestimated Thomas before, and it had nearly killed her. The next hour was controlled chaos. Jack positioned men around the property with rifles and lanterns, creating a perimeter that would make any approach visible. Cole brought out every lamp they owned, turning the ranch yard into something approaching daylight. Emma was sent to Mrs. Chen's with Miguel, despite her protests. This was no place for a child. And Mara stood in the kitchen, watching the preparations through the window, trying to prepare herself for seeing Thomas's face again. She was feeding the starter, a mindless routine that kept her hands busy, when Mrs. Chen arrived with what looked like half the valley. Farmers, ranchers, their wives, and older children. At least 30 people, all armed, all grim-faced. Mrs. Chen found Mara in the kitchen. That man at my house, he's not right in the head. Kept talking about his wife like she was property he'd lost. Said terrible things about what he'd do when he found you. She gripped Mara's shoulders. We're not letting him take you. This valley protects its own. The words brought tears to Mara's eyes. These people barely knew her, but they'd come anyway. Because the frontier worked that way. You helped your neighbors, especially when powerful men came calling with violence. Around 2 a.m, the rider appeared. Thomas came alone, which surprised her. He'd always surrounded himself with people who'd back his version of events. But maybe he'd learned that didn't work 3,000 miles from home. He rode slowly, deliberately, giving them time to see him coming. Even from a distance, Mara recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he held the reins. Her body remembered before her mind did, tensing with old fear. Cole appeared beside her. You don't have to do this. Say the word and we send him away. He won't go, not without forcing the issue. She took a breath. Better to control when and how it happens. They walked out together into the lamplight. Thomas was dismounting, his eyes scanning the crowd with barely concealed contempt. When his gaze found Mara, something flickered across his face. Triumph, rage, possessiveness, all mixed together. Mary. His voice was exactly as she remembered. Cultured, controlled, with an edge that could slice through skin. I've been looking everywhere for you. My name is Mara, and you shouldn't have bothered. He laughed, a sound with no warmth. Playing house with these frontier folk doesn't change who you are. You're my wife. You belong with me. I was your wife. Past tense. And I never belonged to anyone. The state of Massachusetts disagrees. We're legally married. That means you come home with me. He took a step forward, and Cole moved between them, his presence a wall. The lady says she's staying. That means you're leaving. Thomas looked Cole up and down with open disdain. And who exactly are you? The man who's going to put a bullet in you if you take one more step toward her. How very Western of you, threatening violence instead of respecting the law. Thomas pulled a paper from his coat. I have a court order from Boston granting me custody of my wife until such time as she can be evaluated by a physician. She's been deemed mentally unstable, prone to delusions and violent outbursts. This is a medical matter, not a legal one. The words hit Mara like a physical blow. He'd done it. He'd actually convinced a judge she was insane, used his money and influence to create legal justification for dragging her back. That's a lie, she said, her voice shaking with rage. I'm not mentally unstable. You beat me, controlled me, and when I finally escaped, you decided to rewrite history. You see? Thomas addressed the crowd now, playing to an audience. She's paranoid, delusional. I never laid a hand on her. Ask anyone in Boston. I'm a respected businessman, a pillar of the community. Why would I abuse my own wife? Because abusers always look respectable on the outside, Mara shot back. That's how they get away with it. These are serious accusations. Do you have proof? Witnesses? Medical records documenting these supposed beatings? He spread his hands. No, of course not, because they never happened. The crowd was watching, uncertain. Thomas was good at this, twisting reality, making himself the victim. Mara could see some of them wavering. Then Mrs. Chen stepped forward. I've seen the scars. Thomas's smile faltered. When Mara first arrived, she had bruises shaped like fingerprints on her arms, marks around her throat that looked like someone tried to strangle her, burns on her back that she said came from being held against a stove. Mrs. Chen's voice was steady, factual. Those aren't the marks of someone who's delusional. They're the marks of someone who survived. Marks that could have come from anywhere, Thomas countered. She could have inflicted them herself for sympathy. Unstable people do that. I examined them, said a voice from the crowd. Dr. Harrison, the town physician, stepped forward. I treated Miss Quinn 2 months ago for an infection in one of the older wounds. The scarring pattern was consistent with prolonged physical abuse, not self-inflicted injury. Thomas's expression darkened. This is absurd. I have a legal document. From a court 3,000 miles away that never heard her side of the story, Cole interrupted. That's not justice. That's you using money to manufacture legitimacy. And what exactly is your interest in this, Mr. Ashford, Cole Ashford? And my interest is that Mara works for me, lives on my property, and I don't let anyone terrorize my people. Your people. Thomas's laugh was ugly now. You've known her what? A few months? I've been married to her for 3 years. I know exactly what she is. A liar, a thief, and a whore who'll spread her legs for anyone offering protection. The words hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then Cole's fist connected with Thomas's jaw with a crack that echoed across the yard. Thomas went down hard, blood spraying from his split lip. He scrambled backward, reaching for something in his coat. And Mara was moving before conscious thought caught up. The kitchen knife was in her hand, the blade pressing against Thomas's throat before he could draw whatever weapon he'd been reaching for. Don't, she said softly. Don't make me do something we'll both regret. Thomas froze, his eyes wide with shock. He'd never seen her fight back before, never imagined she was capable of it. You want to know what changed? Mara's voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. I stopped believing your version of who I am. I stopped thinking I deserved the way you treated me, and I started building a life where I actually matter to people. You're nothing without me. I'm everything without you. She pressed the blade slightly harder, drawing a bead of blood. I bake bread that people love. I take care of a little girl who trusts me. I've built a business, fought off a land baron, and survived everything this valley threw at me. What have you done besides hunt down a woman who doesn't love you? Thomas's face contorted with rage. You think these people will protect you? Once they know what you really are, they know exactly what I am. Broken, scared, running from a monster, and they help me anyway. She pulled the knife back but stayed close, her eyes locked on his. That's the difference between here and Boston. Out here, people judge you by what you do, not by what you can buy. She stood, stepping back to Cole's side. Thomas climbed to his feet, dabbing at his bleeding lip, his expression venomous. This isn't over. I'll file charges, assault, kidnapping, theft. I'll destroy you and everyone who helped you. No, you won't. Jack stepped forward, holding up the camera. Because I just photographed you reaching for a gun while threatening an unarmed woman. That's attempted murder, Thomas. And unlike your court order, my photographs show exactly what happened. Thomas's face went white. You're bluffing. Try me. You go back to Boston and file charges. These photos go to every newspaper in California, along with witness testimony from 30 people who watched you threaten Mara's life. Jack's smile was cold. Wonder how that'll play with your respectable business associates. The standoff stretched. Thomas looked at the crowd, at the rifles, at the united front standing against him. For the first time since he'd arrived, Mara saw fear in his eyes. You can't keep her forever, he said finally. Eventually, she'll make a mistake, and I'll be there. Then you'll be waiting a long time, Cole said, because she's not leaving. Not now, not ever. And if you come back, we won't be this civilized. Thomas mounted his horse, his movements stiff with rage and humiliation. Before he left, he looked at Mara one last time. I loved you. No, she replied quietly. You loved owning me. There's a difference. He rode into the darkness, and Mara stood there shaking, hardly believing he was actually gone. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring among themselves, offering quiet words of support as they passed. Mrs. Chen hugged her fiercely. Doctor. Harrison promised to document her injuries officially if she ever needed evidence. Jack clapped Cole on the shoulder and went to put away the camera, and then it was just Mara and Cole in the lamplight, the adrenaline fading and leaving exhaustion in its wake. You held a knife to his throat, Cole said. I did. I've never seen anything more terrifying or more beautiful. She laughed, a sound close to hysteria. I thought I was going to throw up the entire time. You didn't show it. He pulled her close, and she let herself collapse against his chest, breathing in the smell of him, leather and wood smoke and safety. He's really gone. For now, men like Thomas don't give up easily. Neither do women like you. He tilted her face up. You were magnificent. I was scared out of my mind. Same thing sometimes. She wanted to kiss him. Wanted to let the relief and fear and desperate hope turn into something physical, something real. But Emma would be home soon, and there were still lamps to extinguish, and the sun would rise in a few hours demanding bread. Life didn't pause for dramatic moments. It just kept going, relentless and beautiful. "We should sleep," she said instead. "Yeah, we should." Neither of them moved. Finally, Cole stepped back, his hand trailing down her arm until only their fingers were connected. "After we deal with Thornton, after everything settles, we're having that conversation about what happens next, about what we want to happen next." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "If that's something you want to discuss." "It is," she said softly. "It really is." The next morning brought news that Thornton had withdrawn his claim on the ranch. No explanation, no fanfare, just a terse letter delivered by a lawyer stating that after reviewing the documentation, the bank had determined the debt was satisfied and no further action would be taken. Cole read the letter 3 times, disbelieving. "We won," he said finally. "We survived," Mara corrected. "That's different." But Emma was laughing, dancing around the kitchen, and Jack was whooping in the yard, and for a moment survival felt like the same thing as a victory. The celebration was short-lived. That afternoon, while Mara was preparing orders for the general store, a different kind of trouble arrived. The Sacramento Gazette food critic, true to his word, had published his article, and apparently it had been very favorable. The first indication was the telegram that arrived at noon, addressed to Mara Quinn, from a restaurant owner in San Francisco. He wanted to discuss a contract for regular bread delivery, 200 loaves per week at premium prices. Then another telegram, and another. By evening, she had 7 offers from businesses throughout California, all wanting her bread. The numbers were staggering. If she accepted even half of them, she'd be making more money than Cole earned from the entire ranch. "You have to do this," Cole said, looking at the telegrams spread across the kitchen table. "I can't bake 200 loaves a week and still handle my duties here." "Then hire help, expand. Turn this into a real business." He met her eyes. "This is your chance, Mara. Don't let it pass because you're afraid of change." "I'm not afraid of change. I'm afraid of losing this." She gestured at the kitchen, the ranch beyond. "What if I build something so big it takes me away from here? From Emma, from you? What if you build something so big it gives all of us a better future?" He took her hands. "I'm not asking you to choose between the bread and the ranch. I'm saying maybe you can have both." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think she could expand her small bread business into something substantial without losing the life she'd built here. But experience had taught her that wanting and having were very different things. The decision was made for her 3 days later when Emma came down with fever. It started as a cough, nothing serious, just a cold. But by nightfall, she was burning up, delirious and crying for her mother. Dr. Harrison came, examined her, and his expression grew grave. "Pneumonia. Could be bacterial, could be viral. Either way, she needs better care than I can provide here." He looked at Cole. "There's a hospital in Sacramento. They have experience with cases like this." "How much?" Cole's voice was tight. "For treatment? Probably $500. Maybe more if she needs extended care." Cole's face went gray. "I don't have that kind of money. Not liquid. Everything's tied up in the ranch." Mara was already moving, pulling out the cash box where she kept her bread earnings. She'd been saving for supplies, for expansion, for security. She dumped it on the table and started counting. $340. Not enough. "The telegrams," she said suddenly. "The contracts. I can wire them. Accept the offers. Ask for advance payment." "Mara, that's your future. Emma is my future. She was already writing out telegrams, her hand steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Nothing else matters if we lose her." They sent the telegrams that night. By morning, responses started arriving. 2 restaurants agreed to advance payment. A hotel in Oakland offered $300 for guaranteed weekly delivery. A bakery in Sacramento wanted to license her recipes. By noon, they had $800. More than enough. They left immediately, Cole driving the wagon while Mara held Emma in her arms. The girl drifted in and out of consciousness, her skin hot as a stove, her breathing labored. Mara whispered to her, told her stories, promised her everything would be fine, even though she had no way of knowing if that was true. The hospital in Sacramento was clean and efficient and terrifyingly expensive. They took Emma immediately, hooking her up to machines and medicines that Mara didn't understand. A nurse explained the treatment plan while Cole signed papers authorizing the expense. Then there was nothing to do but wait. They sat in the hallway outside Emma's room, not touching, barely speaking. Cole's face was a mask of controlled terror. Mara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "If she doesn't make it," Cole started. Don't finish that sentence." Mara grabbed his hand. "She's going to make it. She has to. She's all I have left of Sarah. If I lose her too." "You won't. We won't." She squeezed tighter. "Emma's a fighter. She survived losing her mother, survived 2 years of silence, survived all of this. She's not giving up now." Cole's eyes were wet. "When did you start loving her?" "The first time she spoke to me. Maybe before that." Mara's voice cracked. "She's the daughter I never thought I'd have, the family I didn't know I needed." "And me?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What am I to you?" She looked at him then, really looked, and saw past the grief and fear to the man underneath. The one who'd given her a chance when she needed it most, who'd fought beside her against Thornton and Thomas, who'd trusted her with his daughter and his home and his broken heart. "You're the reason I stopped running," she said. "The reason I started believing I could have something worth staying for." He kissed her then, there in the hospital hallway, with their daughter fighting for her life a room away. It wasn't romantic or gentle. It was desperate and terrified and real. When they broke apart, a nurse was clearing her throat politely. "She's stabilized. The fever's breaking. She's asking for you." They were on their feet instantly, rushing into the room. Emma looked tiny in the hospital bed, pale and fragile, but her eyes were open and clear. "Mara," she whispered. "Papa?" "Oh, we're here, sweetheart." Mara took her hand, felt the heat already fading from her skin. "We're right here. I had a dream. Mama was there. She said..." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "She said it was okay to love you, that she wanted me to be happy." Mara's throat closed. Cole made a sound like he'd been punched. "She said you'd take care of me," Emma continued, looking between them. "Both of you. Together. Is that true?" "Yes," Cole said, his voice rough. "That's true." "Forever?" "Forever," Mara promised. Emma smiled, exhausted but peaceful, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was sleeping naturally. The crisis passed. They stayed with her for 3 days while she recovered. During that time, Mara negotiated contracts via telegram. Cole arranged for Jack to handle the ranch, and together they made plans for a future that suddenly seemed possible. On the 4th day, they brought Emma home. The ranch had never looked more beautiful. The land golden in the autumn sun, the house solid and welcoming, the kitchen waiting for bread. Mrs. Chen had organized the neighbors to prepare a welcome. There was food, music, celebration. Emma was passed from person to person, hugged and kissed and welcomed back. Cole stood with his arm around Mara's waist, and nobody commented on it because everyone had eyes. That night, after Emma was asleep and the last visitor had gone, Mara and Cole sat on the porch watching the stars. "I have something to ask you," Cole said. "I know." "You don't know the question yet." "Yes, I do." She turned to face him. "And my answer is yes." He smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen in weeks. "Marry me, Mara Quinn. Not because you need protection or because Emma needs a mother, but because I love you. Because you're the strongest, bravest, most magnificent woman I've ever met. Because I want to spend the rest of my life watching you build impossible things and refuse to disappear." "Yes," she said again, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes to all of it." He produced a ring, simple, handmade, probably from Jack's sister who was a silversmith. It fit perfectly. They were married a month later in a ceremony that was equal parts solemn and chaotic. Emma was the flower girl, wearing a dress Mrs. Chen had sewn. Jack was Cole's best man. Half the valley attended, eating bread Mara had baked that morning, despite Cole's protest that the bride shouldn't have to work on her wedding day. "I'm not a bride," she'd told him. "I'm a baker who's getting married. There's a difference." The business grew. Within a year, Mara had hired 3 assistants and converted the old barn into a commercial bakery. Her bread sold throughout California, her recipes were featured in newspapers, and the ranch's finances transformed from struggling to thriving. Thornton left the valley, his reputation destroyed and his schemes exposed. Rumor had it he was facing fraud charges in 3 states. Thomas never returned. Mara heard through Jack's connections that he'd remarried quickly, some young woman who probably had no idea what she was getting into. She felt sorry for the girl but couldn't save everyone. Emma grew strong and loud and fearless. She learned to bake, to ride, to shoot, and to speak her mind. She called Mara Mama without hesitation and told anyone who'd listen about the woman who'd saved her family. And Mara Quinn, no longer Mary Cunningham, no longer running, no longer afraid, built a life she'd never imagined possible. A life where she took up space without apology, where her voice mattered, where love didn't come with conditions or violence. She'd come to this ranch carrying nothing but a battered suitcase, a sourdough starter, and the weight of a past that tried to erase her. She'd stayed because she found people worth fighting for and a future worth building. And she'd survived because she finally understood that the only approval she needed was her own. The bakery fire started on a Wednesday morning in late spring, 18 months after the wedding. Mara smelled smoke before she saw flames, that acrid, wrong smell that meant something was burning that shouldn't be. She dropped the dough she was kneading and ran toward the barn-turned bakery, her heart already knowing what her mind refused to accept. The entire east wall was engulfed. Flames licked up the wooden beams, hungry and fast, fed by flour dust and dry timber. Her 3 assistants were already outside, coughing and terrified, but safe. "How did this start?" Mara demanded, watching months of work disappear into smoke. "Don't know," gasped Maria, the youngest. "I was mixing dough, turned around, and the whole corner was on fire, like someone dumped kerosene and lit a match." Someone. Not something. Cole appeared with buckets, organizing a water line from the well. Jack and the ranch hands formed a chain, passing buckets hand to hand, but it was already too late. The building was lost. The best they could do was keep it from spreading to the house. Mara stood there watching her business burn, watching contracts and reputation and financial security turn to ash, and felt a familiar cold rage settle in her chest. This wasn't an accident. Accidents didn't smell like kerosene. Accidents didn't start in corners far from any heat source. Someone had done this deliberately. By noon, the fire was out, leaving a blackened skeleton where the bakery had stood. The main house was safe, the livestock untouched, but Mara's livelihood was destroyed. Ovens, supplies, equipment, all gone. Even the starter, her grandmother's century-old starter that had traveled 3,000 miles, had been inside. Emma found her sitting in the ruins an hour later, her face streaked with soot and tears. "Mama?" The girl's voice was small, scared. "Is it all gone?" "The building, yes. The business." Mara looked at the destruction. "I don't know yet." "Was it Mr. Thornton or that man from Boston?" "Maybe. Or maybe just bad luck." But she didn't believe that, and neither did Emma. Cole joined them, his face grim. "Found this near where the fire started." He held up a piece of paper, partially burned but still readable. On it, in crude handwriting, "Whores and thieves get what they deserve." The words hit like a slap. Mara took the note, studying it, trying to match the handwriting to anyone she knew. It wasn't Thomas's elegant script or Thornton's precise lettering. This was someone else. Someone who hated her enough to commit arson, but was too cowardly to sign their work. "I'm calling the sheriff," Cole said. "Don't. He won't do anything without proof, and we don't have any." Mara stood, brushing soot from her dress. "Whoever did this wanted to scare me, wanted to watch me fail. I'm not giving them that satisfaction. Mara, the business is gone. The contracts can be honored from a different location. I still have my hands, my knowledge, my recipes." She looked at the house, at the kitchen that had been her first workspace. "I started this in your kitchen with nothing but a sourdough starter and determination. I can do it again." That was different. You didn't have contracts, deadlines, hundreds of loaves to deliver each week. "So I'll work harder, sleep less, find another way." Her voice sharpened. "I didn't survive Thomas and Thornton just to be destroyed by an anonymous coward with a match." Emma was watching her with those 2 old eyes, and Mara saw herself reflected there. The stubborn refusal to break, the angry determination to survive. She knelt down, pulled the girl close. "Sometimes people try to destroy what they can't control," she said quietly. "Sometimes they hurt us because our existence threatens them. but we don't let them win. Understand? Emma nodded against her shoulder. We fight back. We fight back. That night, after Emma was in bed, Mara sat at the kitchen table with Cole and Jack, making lists. They had contracts for 800 loaves per week across 5 different clients. The barn bakery had been able to produce that amount with 3 assistants and industrial equipment. The house kitchen could maybe handle 100 loaves a week if she worked around the clock. You need a new building, Jack said. Something fireproof this time, stone or brick. Which costs money we don't have. Cole had the ledgers open, showing numbers that didn't add up. The ranch is doing better, but not brick building better. Not quickly. So we borrow, Mara said. From who? The bank's still nervous after the Thornton situation. Not the bank, the clients. She pulled out the contracts. We tell them what happened, offer them a choice. Cancel the contract and we part ways. Or invest in rebuilding and we guarantee supply for 5 years at current rates. Lock in prices now before they go up. Cole studied her. That's a hell of a gamble. If they say no, you've got nothing. If they say no, I've got exactly what I have now, a burned building and broken contracts. Might as well try. She started drafting telegrams. Worst case, I'm back where I started 4 months ago. Best case, I build something bigger and better. And if whoever burned the bakery comes back? Jack asked quietly. If they try again? Then we'll be ready. Mara met his eyes. I'm done being a victim, Jack. Someone wants to fight? Fine. But they better be prepared for me to fight back harder. The telegrams went out that night. By the next afternoon, responses started arriving. The Sacramento hotel agreed immediately, offering a $1,000 investment for guaranteed supply. The San Francisco restaurant countered with $1,500 if she'd add pastries to the weekly order. One by one, her clients chose to invest rather than walk away. Within 3 days, she had $6,000 in commitments, enough to build something substantial, but money didn't solve the immediate problem. She still had orders to fill, deadlines to meet, a reputation to maintain. If she missed deliveries, clients would lose faith regardless of their investments. We need help, Cole said, watching her work the kitchen stove at 3 in the morning, trying to bake enough bread to cover even half of what she owed. You can't do this alone. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. And right now the smart choice is asking for help before you collapse. He was right, and she hated it. Mara had spent so much of her life being forced to depend on others, being made powerless by that dependence, that the idea of asking for help felt like surrender. But Emma's words came back to her. We fight back. And sometimes fighting meant knowing when you couldn't win alone. Fine, she said, exhaustion making her voice harsh. But I don't know who to ask. Cole smiled. I do. By that evening, Mrs. Chen had arrived with her 2 oldest daughters, Mrs. Patterson came from the general store, bringing her sister. The wives of 3 ranch hands showed up with aprons and determination. Even the food critic from Sacramento appeared, announcing he'd taken a week's leave to document the phoenix rising from the ashes for his newspaper. They turned the ranch house into a temporary bakery. Every surface became a workspace. Women who'd been baking for their families for decades brought their skills and their recipes. The kitchen ran in shifts, some mixing, some kneading, some watching ovens, some packaging finished loaves. It was chaos. It was loud and crowded and completely unsustainable long term. It was also beautiful. Mara stood in the middle of it all, directing traffic, answering questions, keeping the rhythm going, and felt something shift in her chest. These people weren't here because she'd paid them or because they owed her. They were here because community meant showing up when someone needed help. Emma moved through the crowd like a small general, delivering supplies, checking timers, taste-testing products with serious concentration. She'd become the unofficial quality control, her palate surprisingly sophisticated for an 8-year-old. This batch needs more salt, she announced, handing a piece to Mara. And the oven's too hot on the left side. How can you tell? The crust is darker on one edge. You taught me that. Emma looked up at her with pride. I'm learning to be like you. The words settled in Mara's heart like seeds in good soil. This girl who'd been silent and broken was now confident and capable, learning to take up space in the world without apology. If she'd done nothing else right in her life, she'd done this. The week was brutal. They worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts, pushing themselves to the edge of collapse. But they met every order. Every loaf was delivered on time, and most were better quality than before because now each one carried the care of multiple skilled hands. The clients noticed. The Sacramento hotel sent an additional order. The San Francisco restaurant requested a meeting to discuss expansion. Word spread about the community effort, and the newspaper article, when it published, turned Mara's struggle into a statewide story about resilience and cooperation. New orders started arriving. Then orders from places that had never heard of her before, people who wanted to support the baker who'd survived fire and kept her promises. Within 2 weeks, she had more business than she could handle. "This is insane," she told Cole one night, staring at the stack of telegrams. "I went from losing everything to having more opportunities than I can possibly fulfill. So hire more people, build bigger, turn this into something massive, or turn it into something sustainable." She looked at the women who'd been helping, now gathered in the kitchen sharing dinner and stories. What if instead of one big bakery, we create a cooperative? Multiple women, multiple locations, all baking under the same standards. We share resources, share profits, support each other. Cole was quiet for a moment. "You'd be giving up control." "No, I'd be sharing power. There's a difference." She met his eyes. "I spent years being controlled by one person. I don't want to become that person for others. But if we do this together, if we build something where everyone has a stake, then you create something that can't be destroyed by one fire or one person's hatred," Cole finished. "You're building a community, not just a business." Is that naive? It's the smartest thing I've heard all week. The cooperative took 3 months to establish properly. Mara worked with each woman individually, teaching techniques, sharing recipes, ensuring quality standards. They established clear agreements, profit sharing, decision-making processes, support systems for when someone faced hardship. Mrs. Chen set up a bakery in her barn. Mrs. Patterson's sister converted a shed on her property. 3 other women rented space in town. Each location produced bread according to the same recipes and standards, but each also had flexibility to innovate and experiment. The new stone bakery on Ashford Ranch became the training center and central hub, built with the investment money and designed to be fireproof, secure, and large enough to handle the biggest orders. And Mara's starter, which she'd thought lost forever, turned up in an unexpected place. One of her assistants had been feeding a portion of it at home, maintaining it as backup without telling anyone. When she brought the jar to Mara, both of them cried. "I thought about what you said," Maria explained. "About it being 100 years old, about it connecting you to your grandmother. I figured something that survived that long deserved redundancy." The starter went back to work, older and stronger, having survived yet another disaster. By summer, the cooperative was producing 1,200 loaves per week across 6 locations. Profits were split fairly. Women who'd been struggling to feed their families now had reliable income, and the quality remained exceptional. But success brought new problems. The anonymous harassment continued. Threatening letters arrived at the ranch, crude and hateful. Someone poisoned 2 of the ranch dogs. They survived, but the message was clear. Small acts of vandalism plagued the property. Fences cut, equipment damaged, supplies contaminated. It was wearing on everyone. Emma started having nightmares again. Cole slept with his rifle beside the bed. Mara found herself jumping at shadows, constantly looking over her shoulder. "This has to stop," Jack said after finding another threatening note. "We need to figure out who's doing this." "I have an idea," Mara said slowly, "but you're not going to like it." She'd been thinking about the note found after the fire. The handwriting was crude, but the language was specific. Whores and thieves. That particular combination of insults matched something she'd heard before months ago during the bread competition. Mrs. Green, the woman who'd won after Thornton's interference, had made a comment to someone about that Eastern whore stealing business from honest folk. Mara had ignored it at the time, assuming it was just bitterness about the critics' praise. But what if it was more than that? "You think Helen Green burned the bakery?" Cole sounded skeptical. "She's a grandmother. She bakes pies for church. So did the woman in Boston who helped Thomas track me down because she thought I was an ungrateful wife." Mara pulled out the note, comparing it mentally to the grocery list she'd seen Mrs. Green write at the general store. "Mean people come in all shapes and ages, Cole. And resentment makes people do terrible things. They needed proof. Accusations without evidence would just make things worse, especially against someone as respected as Mrs. Green. The opportunity came 2 weeks later during the county fair. Every baker in the valley would be there, competing in various categories. Mara had entered the cooperative's bread, but she also had another plan. She brought the threatening notes with her, tucked in her bag. During the competition, while judges were tasting entries, she approached Mrs. Green at her table. "Your rye bread looks beautiful," Mara said pleasantly. "Would you mind writing down your recipe for me? I'd love to try it." Mrs. Green smiled, syrupy sweet. "Of course, dear. Let me just find some paper." She pulled out a small notebook and began writing. Mara watched carefully, noting the slant of the letters, the way certain words were formed. When Mrs. Green handed over the recipe, Mara compared it mentally to the threatening notes. It was a match. Same handwriting, same particular way of forming the letter R, same spacing. "Thank you so much," Mara said, tucking the recipe away. "This is very helpful." That night she showed Cole and Jack the evidence. "It's not enough for the sheriff to arrest her, but it's enough for me to know." "So what do we do?" Jack asked. "We confront her, publicly, at the award ceremony tomorrow." Cole looked alarmed. "Mara, that's risky, I know. But she's been hiding behind respectability and community standing. Take that away, and what does she have? Fear of consequences might be enough to make her stop." The next day, as the judges announced winners in various categories, Mara took the stage during the open comment period. "I have something to address," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Over the past months, my property has been vandalized, my bakery was burned, and I've received threatening letters. I now have evidence identifying who's responsible." The crowd went silent. Mrs. Green, sitting 3 rows back, had gone very pale. "I'm not interested in revenge or even legal action," Mara continued, "but I'm interested in the truth. And the truth is that success doesn't require tearing others down. There's room for all of us to thrive. So whoever has been targeting me, this is your chance to stop. Walk away. Find a better way to channel your anger." She pulled out the threatening notes and the recipe card, held them up so people could see. Handwriting analysis is a simple thing. Anyone can compare these and see they match. I'm choosing not to name names because I believe people deserve the chance to change. But if the harassment continues, I won't be this generous. She left the stage to stunned silence. Mrs. Green stood abruptly and left the fairgrounds, her face burning with shame and rage. The vandalism stopped after that. No more notes, no more sabotage. Word spread through the valley about what had happened, and public opinion turned hard against whoever had been responsible. Mrs. Green moved away 2 months later, claiming family obligations in another state. Mara never confirmed publicly that it was her, but the community drew its own conclusions. Emma, watching all of this, asked the question that had been building. "Why didn't you want her arrested? She tried to destroy everything you built." "Because sometimes the best revenge is just moving forward and being successful despite people trying to stop you," Mara explained. "And because I know what it's like to be trapped by mistakes. She made terrible choices, but maybe she'll learn from them. That's very forgiving of you." "It's not about forgiveness. It's about not letting other people's hatred define my actions." Mara pulled her daughter close. "I could have spent my whole life being angry at Thomas for what he did to me, and that anger would have been justified. But it also would have eaten me alive, turned me into someone bitter and small. I chose to build something instead. That's the real victory." The cooperative grew. Within a year, it included 12 women across 3 counties. Profits were good, quality remained high, and the model started attracting attention from other communities wanting to replicate it. A women's organization from San Francisco invited Mara to speak about her experience. Standing in front of 200 women, many of them survivors of abuse or hardship themselves, she told her story without softening the edges. "I didn't escape because I was brave," she said. "I escaped because staying became more terrifying than leaving. And I didn't succeed because I was special. I succeeded because I found people who believed I was worth helping, and I learned to believe it too." She talked about the sourdough starter, about how bread required patience and care and couldn't be rushed, about how building a life was the same, slow, deliberate work that paid off in something nourishing and real. "You can't force bread to rise faster than it wants to," she said, "and you can't force yourself to heal on someone else's timeline. You just keep showing up, keep doing the work, and trust that eventually something beautiful will emerge. The speech was reprinted in newspapers throughout California. Letters arrived from women across the country, sharing their own stories, asking for advice, finding hope in her words. Mara answered every letter. It took time she didn't have, energy she could barely spare, but she remembered what it had felt like to be alone and desperate. If her words could help even one woman find the courage to leave or the strength to rebuild, it was worth it. Emma, now 10, was helping manage parts of the cooperative. She'd developed a gift for numbers and organization, tracking orders and inventory with precision that impressed even Cole. She talked about wanting to expand the business someday, maybe into pastries or specialty items. "You're going to do amazing things," Mara told her one evening, watching her daughter work through accounts. "Because you taught me to," Emma replied simply. "You taught me that being strong doesn't mean never being scared. It means doing what needs to be done even when you're terrified." 2 years after the fire, on a warm October evening, Mara stood in the stone bakery watching the sun set through the western windows. The building smelled like bread and possibility. Around her, 3 women were cleaning up after the day's production, laughing about something one of them had said. Cole appeared in the doorway, Emma on his shoulders despite her protests that she was too old for that. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Home. The word still surprised her sometimes with its weight and warmth. This ranch that had been a hiding place had become something much more. A foundation. A launching point. A place where broken things could be made whole. Almost, "I need to feed the starter first." She moved to the special climate-controlled cabinet where the starter lived now, protected and precious. The jar bubbled contentedly, a living connection to her grandmother, to her past, to everything she'd survived. As she measured out flour and water, Emma climbed down from Cole's shoulders and came to watch. "Will you teach me how to make my own starter?" she asked. "So when I'm older, I can pass it on too?" Mara's hands stilled. In that moment, she saw the future stretching out. Emma building her own life, maybe having children of her own someday, passing down recipes and stories and the knowledge that survival was possible even when it seemed impossible. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll teach you everything." That night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Mara sat on the porch with Cole. The stars were brilliant, the air cool and clean. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Leaving Boston, coming here, all of it?" "Never. Not even the hard parts." She leaned against him, solid and warm. "The hard parts made me who I am." "And who are you?" She thought about that question. Once she would have struggled to answer, would have defined herself by other people's needs or expectations. But now, "I'm a woman who bakes bread," she said simply, "who loves her family, who builds things instead of destroying them, who takes up space without apologizing for it. That's a good person to be. It's the only person I want to be." They sat in comfortable silence, and Mara thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fear and pain of those first desperate weeks. The slow, painful process of learning to trust again. The terror of facing Thomas and Thornton. The grief of watching the bakery burn. The joy of watching Emma heal and grow. All of it had been necessary. All of it had shaped her into someone who could stand here now, rooted and strong, unafraid of the future. She'd arrived at this ranch as Mary Cunningham, a woman trying to disappear. She'd become Mara Quinn Ashford, a woman impossible to ignore. And that transformation hadn't happened because she was perfect or fearless or unusually strong. It happened because she'd been given a chance and she'd chosen to take it. Because she'd found people worth fighting for and she'd refused to give up. Because she'd learned that surviving wasn't enough. You had to build something worth surviving for. The bread had taught her that. You couldn't rush it, couldn't force it, couldn't make it be something it wasn't. You just had to show up every day, do the work, trust the process, and eventually something nourishing emerged. Life was the same. Healing was the same. Building a future was the same. You showed up. You did the work. You trusted that effort mattered even when results seemed impossible. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very stubborn, you ended up somewhere better than anywhere you'd imagined. Mara Quinn had refused to disappear. She'd fought when fighting seemed futile. She'd built when building seemed impossible. She'd loved when love seemed too risky. And in the end, she'd created something that couldn't be taken away. A life that was wholly, completely, unapologetically her own. The frontier had tested her. She'd tested it right back. And both of them had been transformed by the encounter. That was the truth of survival. It changed you. The question was whether you let it make you smaller or whether you used it to grow into someone bigger, bolder, more yourself than you'd ever been allowed to be before. Mara had chosen growth, had chosen defiance, had chosen to take up space in a world that kept telling women to shrink. And she'd never regretted it for a single moment. As she sat there on the porch with Cole's arm around her shoulders and Emma sleeping safely inside, and the bakery standing solid against the night sky, Mara Quinn smiled. She'd come here with nothing but a battered suitcase and a sourdough starter. She'd built an empire, not through wealth or power or control, but through bread and community and the stubborn refusal to let anyone, make her less than she was. That was a legacy worth leaving. That was a life worth living. And she was just getting started.